initiatives, to local community litter picks and sustainability groups, to rural and environmental issues, to environment EV chargers for car parks. It really does cover the whole gambit. So there's an amazing opportunity there.
So Linda, earlier in the discussion, there was people saying that we need to cut CO2 emissions by 50% by 2030.
Yep.
And Stefan put on the table something which very few people have been talking about, which is that if we are going to go for 1.5, which is what I want us to be doing, then in fact we've got to go carbon neutral by 2042, right? Mm-hmm. So what are you able to say about numbers? I mean, you've talked about some great activities going on, but in terms of numbers, is there anything you can say about numbers for local authorities generally, or for your local authority?
Well, our action plan does bring us to net zero. That's the ambition, and we are actually actioning that by 2030. So
sorry, by when? Net zero by
2030. You know, wow. Ideally before, but you know, there are a lot of initiatives that can bring our activity, so the council's activity, to that level within that time frame. Now, when you're talking about the wider community, we have the number for the environmental and carbon footprint for the district, and at that point we do our utmost to influence and to educate or encourage people to participate in achieving that target. Now, we're not as in control of it as we are our own initiatives, because it does depend on people's ability to act, but we are mindful of it, and we know the major things that we need to do in order to reduce that.
So it was a couple of years ago now, but I went to King's College in London, and I saw Erica Chernoweth present on this magic factor of how much of a population you need to be massively committed to take action. And the figure she gives is 3.5% of the population. Oh. And of course, she's saying that it's a low number because these are people who need to be so committed that they're willing to be arrested for what they believe. Okay, so we're not asking how many people want to be arrested in East Herts, but what would be an interesting number, you know, is of the population, what sort of percentage of the population do you feel need to be engaged doing something in order to really make a difference? I mean, is that number to be doing the sort of things that you're talking about, is that number 5% or 10%, or at what point do you have what point does the thing start to become a tipping point and have a momentum of its own, with people talking to everybody else and getting everybody else on board? Where do we need to be in terms of public engagement, Linda?
You know, that's a great question, Charles, and I hadn't thought about it from, you know, turning it round to, of the population of East Hertfordshire, how many people need to be engaged? Because, you know, also within that statistic is you could have, like you say, a lower proportion doing bigger things, or many more people doing small things. So either way, the encouragement needs to be as strong as possible for everybody to do as much as they can. And I would say, you know, that would be my objective.
Okay.
But you're absolutely right. You know, measuring that, and when somebody applies for a grant for roof insulation, for example, we can measure that. But then how many people have clicked on the website and actually acted on becoming vegan for January? It's a little bit harder to measure.
Yeah, I saw in the papers some pretty good numbers for vegan January. I don't remember what the figures were, but I was impressed with what they are. But just in this space, we should move on to what do we want from COP26. But just to put on the table one of my wishes for COP26 in this space, Linda, is this question of public engagement. So public engagement was asked for by the UK Climate Change Committee. What I see we've had from the government is we've had quite a bit of action, but I don't feel that it's been explained terribly well. And there's a lot of people I talk to still really have no idea actually what's going on, what they're supposed to do. So as I say, I really want us to have public engagement from the government. I mean, the government has had public engagement on COVID. People can talk about how effective that's been, but there's been some messages, there's been some headlines. So what do you think, Linda? If you had this, well, first of all, let's ask you a question. Do you think, firstly, do you think the government is supporting you in terms of, the central government is supporting you in terms of that public engagement messaging? And secondly, if you had really good public engagement messaging, how much of a difference would that make to your activities in East Herts?
I think it is supportive. The 10-point plan, for example, it covers some great initiatives. How that then filters down to local government is in our ability to be able to more widely publish or advertise, for want of a better word, the grants and initiatives that are available. We can, on the ground, support the move to electric vehicles, for example, in public car parks by facilitating implementing those in rural areas. Now, at a community level, every community is different. So we then become the voice of us getting to know our community and talking to them about the things that are important to them. So at central government, there's a holistic view. We then take in at district and county level through reports and questionnaires and various papers that we that put together as a result what local opinion is, and at that point we can respond.
Okay. Well, let's come on to do now the big question. What do we want from COP26? What do you want from COP26?
Well, I would very much like as many countries to participate as possible and to sign up to it. I would like Charles, you and I talk about the Earth Charter regularly. This is something that it was put together by the United Nations some 20 years ago, and it really takes on the whole gambit of nature and climate and what we're doing to our environment. So, moving the agenda, having an agenda which is beyond climate change and all-encompassing is what I'd like to see achieved. A nod to biodiversity and all of the other elements that we need to sustain our planet. Momentum is what we need. We need buy-in and momentum.
Okay. Well, the Earth Charter, there's been some things that have happened on that. So just make people aware. I think it was around September time that there was the World Leaders Pledge for Nature.
Yes.
And I wasn't aware of the Earth Charter, and I maybe the World Leaders Pledge for Nature maybe is the sort of current version of that.
Yes. Okay.
There's a couple more things going on though. I mean, just this last week, Prince Charles and his Terra Carta initiative has come out. If people haven't seen it, I mean, this is very, very ambitious and similar to some of the aspirations of the Leaders Pledge for Nature. This is supporting the protection and restoration of a minimum 30% of biodiversity on land and below water by 2030 and 50% by 2050. So very, very aspirational. And then there's another initiative also being announced this week, which is the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People. This is 45 countries. So again, very high ambitions for protecting nature, nature-based solutions within the UN framework, and all of these sort of things. So there's actually a lot. There's a lot happening here, Linda.
Yeah.
So, I mean, can we relate this to? Can we relate these amazing, global Prince Charles type of initiatives? Can we relate these down to the local level of Hertfordshire?
Yeah, absolutely. So from 2019 and our declaration, an action plan is developed with lines regarding carbon, but it feels like pretty much every day we're adding in additional lines around biodiversity and planting trees, and other initiatives in what is effectively a rural community which is just north of London. There's a lot of mixture of traffic and farming and great green open spaces. So it's absolutely all on the agenda, and in my belief, it's all necessary. Getting the balance right, trees and reducing cars, encouraging more wildlife and insects, as well as reducing the temperature. It has all to be addressed.
Lynn, did you mind if I make a statement?
Please do.
It's a big statement. You're quite an inspiration.
Thank you.
And if others look at what you're doing and they feel they feel not powered to make, they feel out of sync to make the choices. What empowers you to make so many great choices? If somebody's watching this thinking, wow, she's amazing, she does so many things, and you are amazing, but what message could you give out to empower others to make that difference?
Well, I'm a mum, so that's highly motivational, Gary. I know you feel into that as well. I need to know that my little girl has got something to grow up into, and that's very much a future-based objective, and I'd like to play my role in being the best mum possible. And that's really why I took the role at the council. I had a bit of an epiphany about what can I do, and this role came up, and it was just the perfect opportunity to get involved. But I had a little thought yesterday, what could empower people? And it's quite funny in a way. We've heard of scope 1, 2, and 3. And scope 3, I think, is where everybody can contribute, and that is being less consumptive. And as you know, I'm a Reiki master, so I do my meditation and what have you. And I wondered how it would go if we all sort of took a deep breath on this call and closed our eyes and really went into feeling grateful for all the things that we have around us. And I do this every morning, and it makes me consume less. I'm happier, I'm more content with what I have. And if I think, well, I need something, I really question, do I really need it? Do I need to press that buy button? Do I need to go to the shops again? Not at the moment, obviously, because of COVID. But inspired by being content with what we have, because there's plenty of people on the planet that are really suffering the consequences of our consumptive behavior and pumping carbon dioxide into the air because of what we're doing. Just being mindful about that, because
I peer around the curtain and I look, and you have all the traits of a really happy person. You're passionate, you care about others, your mother earth, and I think that selfishness is one of the cancers of this world, because if we were just a little bit less selfish, we wouldn't throw our rubbish in the water on the floor, we would turn off the light, we would care for others and care for communities that we're never going to meet. And I just think that you take huge action in you do what you say you're going to do, and I want to really acknowledge you for that, because the time's running out. There's only 3 minutes, and the next discussion is about what we can do as individuals to stop global warming. And it just segmented really nicely, because you walk the walk and you talk the talk. And like, I know Charles has planted how many trees amongst his family. He walks the walk. And I plant trees. I take my spare carrier bag to the supermarket. I try and cycle. I try and do so much. But before Charles introduced me to being more conscious to the planet, I really was in ignorance is bliss, blissfully unaware of the things that I was reacting. So when I become my dad, I say, switch off the light, but not because it's going to save me money, but because it's going to make a difference to the environment. And I think the message that they were blissfully unaware that when they were stoking up the coal fire, that they were damaging the earth, or just that. I think that's get that message out. So we always end with a magic wand or a genie rubbing a lamp, but these things don't exist. And I think that I need to think of something else, because this is a reality. If we could make it a reality to change something, people's habits, what do you think? What would you like people's habits to be? Because you're living and walking it.
Well, I think it starts with gratitude. You know, gratitude for what we have, gratitude for what Mother Nature gives us. Reach inside ourselves and, you know, don't blame over there. You know, we all can contribute. Doesn't matter how big or small, but we all can contribute. Don't blame everybody else. Just think about what you can do and how you want to be. Yeah, and I think that's the basis of it. Get involved.
Beautifully, but Charles, you do walk the walk. How many trees have you planted? And here's a good question. How many trees have you contributed towards that, people donating and then trees being planted? You have a secondary hand in that. How many trees have we planted since you started?
At No CO2, in just over 2 years, we've planted 338,000 trees. Yeah. And so those trees, planting those trees, divide by 100, that's 3,300 days work for families in extreme poverty. And it's removing tons of CO2. So as it says behind you on your screen, Gary, if people would like to donate £30, then that will plant 270 trees, and those trees will remove nearly 1.5 tons of CO2 for every year on average that those trees are growing, which is 25, 30 years or whatever, and create nearly 3 days of paid work for people. So it's a big impact for your £30. So Linda,
have you met Liz?
Thank you, Linda, ever so much for that, and thank you for putting gratitude and consumption and mindfulness on the table. I'm not going to follow.
And tax, Charles, and tax.
Forget the tax. Well, thank you for putting those on the table. And now we're going to introduce a new couple of speakers who are really going to focus on individual action. So, Liz Christou, very warm welcome to you. And Gary, can you get Martin Price on the line as well?
I'm trying my best. We're like a swamp.
Okay, we'll start with
going across the water, but underneath there's a lot happening here. Have you two met?
No,
only on the phone.
Hi. But we haven't met formally. Nice to meet you, Liz.
Hi, Annie.
Synergy.
I did see you on a webinar a few weeks ago, Linda, speaking, so it's nice to see you again.
Thank you. I'm going to leave you to it. Best of luck. And Charles, Gary, phenomenal job. Good luck for the rest of the day.
Thank you. Thank you, Linda.
Bye.
I've got to agree there. I can't believe you guys have been on this whole time. You're absolute soldiers. Don't know how you're doing it.
Must be a passion. So, Dr.
Oh, got me. Hello.
Welcome.
Martin, hello.
Right.
I want to just introduce everybody by way of we were at the last webinar, which is with Liz. We were on a webinar with Liz, and afterwards, as Gary does, Gary says, "Well, look, let's all have a chat." And so there were about half a dozen of us. So there was Lewis, who was on earlier, Gabriella, who was on earlier, Martin, who was on earlier, and Gary had this crazy idea to say, "Look, let's have another webinar. And instead of making it an hour, let's make it 5.5 hours, lots of speakers." And then someone else, Lewis, said, right, it's got to be the 15th of January because look at the sign. It's about 1.5 January, 1.5 degrees max. So that's why we're here today. So Liz, thank you for your contribution to making this event happen. And Gary, thanks for
very much for having me.
Charles, you put so much energy into this. Those that don't know, Charles has put hours and hours. This undertaking doesn't just happen. There's a lot of planning that goes into it, and you dedicated so much time, Charles. So that, on behalf of everyone, thank you so much, Charles.
Yeah, amazing effort, guys.
Amazing effort from you.
So really want to give full acknowledgement here to Liz. So Liz, focusing on what individuals can do with climate change. Liz has written a book which you need to take a look at. I've got my Kindle version on the computer. And Liz has also founded an organization. You founded the consumer-led movement. So you've done so much here. And Martin, big welcome to Martin Price from
Can you let me into screen share, please?
Absolutely.
So Martin, working from Dorset. Martin's been working on climate change for a long time. So you've got a lot of background with this, with Friends of the Earth. And so for me, Martin, I really want to be part of making 2021 different, when we can make some of these dreams that you had as a young person joining Friends of the Earth, when we can really make these dreams come true. And Gary, don't give up on the magic wand. We need the magic wand.
So here's the thing. We've got 25 minutes to create a movement and change the world. That's
okay.
We can do it.
When I go to schools, I talk to kids and I say, look, young people, when you're lectured to, you retain 12, 13%, 50% of the information. When it's a debate, the message really does sink in. And we have a lot of knowledge here. How long is your slides for there, Martin?
I can fit it to time. Don't worry.
Because debate.
Can I get? I can't get in. I can't get it to share. Sorry.
I'm gonna assist with that. So how about we let Liz talk for 5 minutes?
Actually, no. We've
and then you and
I would go first, and then Liz follow. It makes a bit more sense because I follow on from Linda quite closely, and then what Liz has got to say really brings it back down to the level of what individuals can do. I'm a sort of link between the two.
Leadership there, I like it. All right, so
bossy.
No, total leadership. Right, so when you share the screen, what happens when you press the green button?
Yeah, I can't get my hang on, files. Okay, I'm in there now. I'm okay, right. It's not in there.
He's a trooper. He really has spent a lot of time on preparing this. This is how
I can't do it. To save time, I will simply talk to them.
Yeah, don't give up. We got. If it's worthwhile, it's worth trying. So at the bottom of the screen, it says share screen with a.
I've gone on to that, but here we are. I got it now. Yeah.
You remember the spider that kept
it's okay.
Just keep going. We just keep going.
Right, I'm there. Okay, right.
Right. Let's see. We're not quite there yet. All I can see.
Yes, you are. Yes. Okay.
Your time starts now. You have 5 minutes, sir. Inspire the world.
Okay. Right. Coming from the point of view of a local group of Friends of the Earth, we've been around for 49 years now as a local group fighting on environmental issues. And that means basically political pressure at a local level. I've put up a slide, which is something that Friends of the Earth UK produced for the government back in June of last year, and it fed into the government's 10-point plan. We identified 5 priorities for a green and fair recovery from COVID, but also with an eye principally on the climate and ecological emergency statements that local authorities such as East Hertfordshire have been making. Key was that health and well-being have to be a priority, and this is something which, unfortunately, for all the good work being done in local authorities, particularly councillors and senior officers have not seen as being the priority. They still have some very old-fashioned, in small inverted commas, economic focuses. To recover from the COVID situation, we have to put green jobs and green livelihoods at the heart of the economy, because that will enable us to build a sustainable future, one that brings down emissions and also protects nature. That means that the economy we have at the moment cannot be revitalised and re-kickstarted. We have to fix it and send it in a different direction. As a rich country, the UK has to take its responsibilities for what it does in other countries, whether that's our investment, our aid programme, or simply what we use our political clout to stop other countries doing. We have to lead by example, but we also have to invest in those countries to help them meet the targets that we in the rich countries want to achieve. And to do that, we have to empower communities, as I think Linda said. We have to empower communities. And this is particularly important because it's come up from the Committee on Climate Change that there are 3 elements to this. Involving people in decisions, not just asking them what they think, but involving them in decisions, providing trusted information and educating the public so they can make those decisions on the basis of good information. So the focus has got to be on creating well-being and sustainable jobs. And we can achieve that if we involve the public. And that's not just about the public being able to act to plant trees or save energy at home or cycle or walk or whatever. Those are very important, very, very important. They've always been at the core of what Friends of the Earth does. But many people don't have the money to embrace clean technologies, or they don't have the opportunity. For example, if you're a tenant and you invest in making your property more energy efficient, the landlord can kick you out and get the benefit of it. So that's a disincentive to investing for those people who are tenants, for example. The government has to create the legal, fiscal and economic conditions to drive that change. We cannot do it without investment in green technologies and enabling ordinary people to make the sort of choices that we've heard earlier in the day. And as I've said before, the political systems must empower the public, as the Climate Committee Change said. In those countries which we've heard a lot of this today, in those countries which aren't as rich as we are in the UK, the key is things like adequate clean water and sanitation, clean air. I'll just make a point on that one. We've lost nearly 2 million people globally to COVID. Do you know how many people die of air pollution every year? The answer is over 4 times as many people every year. And nearly half of those, 4 million, twice as many people who've died from COVID, die from burning wood and other fuels in poorly ventilated and very poor homes. So clean air is essential. Reliable diets, sufficient diets, all of these factors feed in, as we heard earlier, into bringing down population levels. Having a sustainable income, not having to go out into the environment and chop down trees or occupy rainforest or occupy unstable slopes, all of these things, we have to enable people to earn a safe and sustainable income. We need stable environments. And as we heard earlier, the way to avoid disasters is for people to have choices. And we can't take choices unless we have peaceful, stable, non-corrupt political.
Martin, just to give you, you've got 30, you're coming into the end. You've got 30.
This is my last slide. So what we're saying is business as usual is not an option. We now have heard today many of the ways in which we must change. The question, and if you like, my point for COP26 is how do we mobilise citizens, not just to embrace that change, which Liz is going to talk about, but also to demand that change and to be effective as politicised citizens. Right, end of my point.
Thank you very much. Powerful, powerful stuff. I don't know if you know much about who I am, but I'm a social media expert, and I see people create great communities and movement by the word engagement. If we engage the people and we get them as inspired as you are, I think we shouldn't have a problem. And Liz wants to create a whole movement around the world, and I'm so excited. Even though this is the second time I've read the book, and very powerful because you're going for such high goals. Martin, thank you very much. After Liz has spoken, we'll have a debate and we can see how we're going to empower others to move along with your movements. Over to you, Liz.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Liz Christie, and I have written a book. It's called Spend Green and Save the World, Tackling Climate Change Through the Consumer-Led Movement. So the really important bit is about the movement there. So I have founded a movement off the back of it. And that is a vehicle for people to come together. I think we've heard from a few people today the importance of coming together, right? The importance of doing things collectively. And I think that applies to personal action as well. And I saw a real gap that we don't have a vehicle at the moment for personal action to sort of come together, within individual communities, I'm sure there are, but sort of an online, national and international platform to be able to come together and be part of something with our personal actions. I think it can be quite isolating. I think we can feel like we're on our own when we try to take personal action, and what can one person do, that sort of feeling. So the movement is all about coming together and feeling like you're part of something bigger, and being able to make a real impact because we're doing it together, not just on our own.
Well said. You had the floor for 5 minutes if you needed it.
Oh yeah, no, I can take more time. I just wasn't sure if you wanted to chip in.
I love debate. I don't like scripts. Scripts are scripts. Scripts are for politicians. Unless you're an actress or an actor, they're very difficult to make so authentic because you've heard it. You've literally got it down to a T how it's going to be perfect. But when you speak from the heart, it really is powerful. I don't know if I Have a Dream was scripted, but it changed things. And when Gandhi speaks or any of these world leaders, I'm sure that they're not scripted. They come from somewhere. So if we could have a debate, because this is really important. This section here is the bit that I was looking forward to. There was lots looking forward to, and there's been some surprises that I didn't think I was going to enjoy as much, but I have. I've enjoyed all of it. The bit you two are responsible for for helping change people's minds that they can feel empowered. Charles, you're not excluded from that because you can make things really easy. Donate £6, £10, £20. We can plant a tree in Madagascar. So let's have a debate and maybe start with the title. And it says, what can individuals do to stop global warming? And just as if we're in the front room of one of your houses and we're relaxed and we're just having a chat.
Which you are. You are in my front room.
Let's have a chat. Let's just talk about it. How can we stop global warming?
Yeah, so I mean, I think individuals have such an important part to play, and I think there's been so many great angles people have come from today, and they're all crucial, right? There is no one element, this is going to make it all happen. It has to be, everybody has to play a part now. It's such a huge issue, everybody has to get involved. And I think individuals are such an important part of that mix, because collectively reducing our carbon footprint by the things that we do, and people have talked about consumption and how important that is, we can collectively reduce our carbon footprint significantly through the movement. I'm suggesting, actually, I give quite a lot of suggestions, and obviously it's something I've done myself. So I've reduced my carbon footprint down from, I think it was around the UK average of about 8 tonnes, and I've reduced it down to 3 tonnes in the last few years by changing my lifestyle. And I'm sort of now passing on these suggestions, which are, I found really easy to implement, because I've used certain techniques and problem-solving techniques that I've learned in my career that big businesses use around the world really successfully. And I've taken those and put it to this and said, actually, that we can do stuff ourselves using these techniques to make it quite straightforward and quite easy. So it doesn't have to be, oh, I'm making massive changes to my life, I've got to give up meat, oh, it's going to be horrible, I don't want to have to do it. And what I found along the way is actually a massive improvement in my well-being, because lots of reasons. One of them being that I'm living more in line with my values now, because you know, we're all sort of sucked in a bit to this system, aren't we, and going out and buying stuff we don't need all the time. And I think we all know deep down that's not really fulfilling. So moving away from that, stopping buying stuff you don't need, being more conscious about what you do buy, where you spend your money, can be quite fulfilling. Giving it to the right sort of organisations who care about sustainability, care about ethics, you know, that improves your well-being.
I don't want us to be too polite, so let's see what Martin. What do you think? Let's jump.
I'm totally with Liz on the personal action, but for many people, it's about actually understanding what the issues are. For example, in the United Kingdom, we have particularly print media, but also some of the television media and even some of the online media, which is really not giving honest answers to the situation we're facing. Secondly, we have a politics which is largely broken. Most people in Britain did not vote for the government we have. Most people in Britain didn't vote for Brexit. Most people in Britain didn't vote for most of the things that we've got. We don't have an effective political system. And the only way at the moment without reforming that system is to engage people in the political process. Give you an example of what Linda was saying earlier about East Herts. One of the biggest ways in which we can cut emissions is to reduce the need to travel. Electrifying vehicles will not solve the problem. We have to reduce the number of vehicles, and that means we have to reduce the need to travel. But we have a government which is forcing local authorities to build on green spaces. That's both reducing our carbon capture, but it's also increasing the need to travel. So we have to look at the planning system and change the way in which we make decisions about where we plan housing, employment, and so on. Now, COVID has given us a good opportunity. It showed us that change, rapid change, is both possible and that you can encourage the public to be involved in that. What unfortunately it hasn't done is convince decision makers that when we come out of it, we need to go in a different direction, which is why I focused on the National Friends of the Earth approach. So what we've done locally is we're involved as a small local group, we've been in existence for a long time, in responding to 2 local councils' climate emergency plans. We work with a county-wide network in Dorset and a grouping within the Bournemouth, Poole and Christchurch region that we're in. And we've also lobbied the local enterprise partnership, which has a lot of money to spend on business development.
You find
so lobbying through us.
Can I ask a question? Do you find it like pushing a rock uphill, or is it smooth and easy? Is there too much?
One of the difficulties is educating the politicians. And so one of my, I mean, for COP26, I would like to see a massive increase in public engagement as a major feature of what the government does. But I would like that to involve mandatory training for all central government and local government politicians, because they'll come and tell you what is best for the environment, and they don't know the answers. They don't understand all the examples we've seen today.
Unfortunately, you're quite likely correct. that if we had said to somebody in the 70s, you have to wear your seatbelt because it makes you safe, they wouldn't have done it. And if we had said to people in the 60s, you're going to have to give up smoking, or 50s, they would have said, but why? Because it hurts you, it damages your health.
Yeah.
Sometimes legislation and the nanny state has to step in.
Yeah.
But education is also an important factor. Did you know that florists really are contributing to a big problem with plastics? The plastics that they wrap the flowers around. Now, do you think that most florists know that they're damaging the environment and they should use paper?
Yeah.
They go with the economics. So I think that we can't legislate everything. And I want you to disagree with me, because that's a true debate. If we all agree with each other, there's no point. So look, disagree with me. Find something we disagree on. And then
I suppose for me, on the point about, COVID and what the government can do if they get involved and the difference it can make, it's not been very pleasant, no, has it? It's not been very pleasant being told wear a mask everywhere, do this, do that. I mean, I know it's been necessary for the situation, but when it comes to climate, we have an opportunity to help lead the way and to help shape policy and help shape culture by how we spend our money and what we do with it and what we do with our lifestyles. We have that opportunity to shape culture and lead the way, rather than it getting to the point where governments do have to step in and go, do you know what, guys, you're not allowed to drive a car anymore, or you're not allowed to do X, Y, or Z, eat meat. Or, I don't want to get to that point. I want to lead the way by actually refining my lifestyle to a point where I'm better off, where I feel like I've improved my well-being, and that is completely possible in my eyes. It's certainly something that I've found. So I think that's the sort of better way to do it as an individual. If you want to take personal action, you can improve your life. You can actually make a big difference. You can be part of something collectively. That's not to say at all that we don't need policy change. Of course we do, and I think we need all these things at the same time. We don't have time to just focus on one solution, right? We need everybody looking at it from their own perspective.
Absolutely. Those who can obviously should be encouraged to make the changes that Liz is talking about and that we in Friends of the Earth talk about. But there are many people. There are 2 million children in this country living in poverty. They can't afford to make choices about their diet that would enable them to reduce their impact. Most of them, as we saw earlier in the presentation, are not responsible for most of the emissions. It's the richest people in the society that are responsible, but we also have a responsibility to spread, to redirect that income from our carbon pricing towards those people who are too poor or too disenfranchised to make those decisions. So we need legislation. We also need a strong legal system that can enforce the law even when the government feels it doesn't actually want to comply with it. As happened over the third Heathrow runway.
Let's get right to Stefan, please, because there's not long left, and this is where the bit gets interesting, because he's coming in with a different perspective, and this is gripping. If you're watching it, you're thinking, what's he going to say? Because he disagrees. Let's have a listen.
Yes, yeah, I don't mean to be confrontational, but I have a slightly different angle from Martin here. No, you've heard that James Codis explained that climate income can, at least in part, address the issue that Martin is mentioning, which is true, that some people don't have, the poor people don't have the means to choose their low carbon solutions and everything. This is exactly the point that the climate income addresses, which is giving people a few £100 per month extra to make, at least to live better. Maybe for many of them it won't be enough to switch solutions, and there is more to be made. I agree with Martin on this point. But basically, we need to have a progressive approach to fixing social issues and the climate change issues at the same time. So I think that the climate income, by taxing the companies which emit the most CO2 and diverting all this money directly to the citizens, does what Martin wants. You said, Martin, something else, which is a bit bothering to me, which is you said that EVs, electric vehicles, won't fix the problem. So what do you mean by that exactly?
2 points. First of all, with current technologies, there isn't enough of the rare metals needed for the batteries needed for the current fleet of global vehicles. And if other countries that we're talking about, the poorer countries, haven't got the capacity yet, they will aspire to that level, and we aren't able to do that. More importantly, there is the issue of the PM2.5s, which come from car tires and from braking systems, which are one of the biggest causes of air pollution, and now becoming a significant problem in water pollution. That PM2.5 washout from vehicle tires and brake pads is now polluting our water supplies. So if we do that, we can make progress. But the point is, it's about consuming less. We need to consume less travel. If we consume less travel, we won't need so many vehicles. And just to put one other example, obviously people thought about aviation as being a major problem area. Did you realize that the main disease vector for COVID-19 is the aircraft, passenger aircraft? That's how COVID spread around the world.
Yes, but on the other hand, I mean, having a global civilization is not something that we want to end. So, I mean, of course, you can argue that half of the travel is pointless and it's just entertainment and it's just going to the other end of the world. But on the other hand, you cannot neglect the fact that aeronautics is what makes the world one. Of course, we have the digital transformation, which I think will address partly the point that you mentioned, that oftentimes we had to travel for no good reason. I myself, I'm the first to be happy that finally I don't have to travel 3 hours for 1 hour professional meeting that I can very well do on the online. And
Exactly.
for most of those meetings, we didn't actually need to meet physically.
I don't want to be the baddie here, but legacy, even if we live another 100 years, our legacy is young people. And the next section is what do young people want from COP? And I believe that we should give them the time. There's only a minute left. You know, when you're in your passion, when half an hour goes by like a second. It truly was a second. Liz, I don't think we gave you enough time. I don't think we need you back.
I could talk for ages, yeah, but I think you're right. It's really important to hear from these guys coming on next. So interested to hear what they say.
So if you don't mind, young people, come on to stage. All you need to do is connect your camera. Charles has put together some truly inspiring young people. Theo, I met him when he was 14. I go to schools, I do talks, and he came to me afterwards and he said, "Gary, you've inspired me." I said, "No, you've inspired me." He's truly inspiring. All the young people that are about to come on are quite something, but we're doing this for them, and we mustn't forget that. That's the legacy of the children that we might have and that we already have.
So Gary, first, big thanks to Liz and to Martin for joining us. We'll, as you say, we'll have to have them back. There's more to talk about here, but thanks ever so much, Liz.
Thanks so much for having us, and thanks for organising this.
And I'm really looking forward to the next team. So Gary, get them on screen.
She's gone. Charles, come back, Liz. Come back. I don't feel that you had enough airtime there. And technically, let's get the kids here. Look, young people, I'm sorry for calling you kids. So Theo, turn your camera on. Look, just turn your camera on. You come on. If there's a problem, contact me. Charles, you say let's do the other one. This will take me 6 months to recover from this.
Come on, Gary.
You've been troopers today. I don't know how you're doing it.
We're going to be talking to Sila and Lashini.
My camera is disabled, she says. Right. I'm so sad to be coming to the last hour. It's been a roller coaster. It's been quite something. So who's coming on? Let's see.
Sila and Lashini.
Okay, let's do that. So Theo is we'll make him a co-host and he's on. And then There he is. Hey, Theo.
Hey, Theo.
Hey, how's it all going, guys?
Great. Get the others folks on first.
Got it. Okay. Okay, so this Theo, you inspire me.
Hi.
Hi, Sheila. Great to see you.
Good to meet you. Hi.
Isn't there a third young person?
Yeah, Lashini.
Yes, there is.
Come on, Gary.
All right, okay. I
think she's still a listener. She's not a speaker yet.
got it. Okay. Promote to panelist. She's there. Don't leave the air on. Use the air.
Yeah.
This is your mouthpiece. Tell us who you are, Theo, and tell us.
Let me do the introductions then. But I'd rather have Lashini fully participating first, Gary.
Sorry, it says my camera's stopped by the host. I don't know how that happened.
I'll turn mine off in case it's causing some problems.
Oh, it's working.
You are.
Hi.
Fantastic. Hey. Hello, guys. Fantastic to see you. Right. So I met Theo. Well, I met Theo online as part of Enfield Climate Action. I met you, Theo, I don't know, 5-6 months ago. And we're on a webinar like this, and there was this young person came on, and he just blew me away with his comments. I thought, wow, I must get to know Theo. And so a week later, we were talking on the phone, and we said we must do something. And then this event came up, and I thought, right, got to have Theo on here. So who else does he know? So Theo, you brought along a couple of colleagues of yours from the Youth Parliament. But I think what would be great is, look, if you can just introduce yourself, say a bit about yourself, and then we can get into the really serious topic of what do we want from COP26. But let's do the intros first. Theo, if you'd like to kick off and introduce your team and everybody say something about what they're doing. Yeah?
Brilliant. Yes. Hi, my name's Theo Sergio. I'm the leader of London in the UK Youth Parliament. Today we've all prepared different speeches about what we want for COP26. So I'm going to pass over to Lashini.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lashini Subendran. I'm the Member of Youth Parliament for Brent, and I'm currently studying PP at the University of Warwick.
Okay.
Hi everyone, I'm Sila Agurlu. I'm a British Youth Council trustee and a former member of Youth Parliament. Thank you. I'll pass back to you.
I have a thought. It's us older people that screw things up, okay? So we're trying to fix it as best as we can, but this is going to be passed on to you. How I would envision this and it to be a possibility that it flows. That who would like to be the chair? Because I think that Charles and I should leave and just let you talk and we observe. Okay, I just want to, for 20 minutes, you guys just talk, but it needs a chair to move on. So nobody likes the sound of their own voice and they keep going on and on. So you've got to move on the conversation. Would somebody like to chair out of the three of you? Come on, who's the leader?
It can't be me. I talk too much. Someone needs to put me in check.
I'll chair.
Okay. Here we go. Charles and I are leaving, but we'll be in the background listening. Just talk as if we're not here. And you can criticize us all you like for messing it up and how we can change it. Over to you. I really look forward to the next 20 minutes. No pressure.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll start with Theo and we'll hear what he has to say.
Yeah, so the way that we kind of plan this to go is obviously just to let you know who we are, where we get our kind of information from. Obviously, we are young people, so we can talk from our own opinion. We don't think this is strong enough, so we have a Youth Parliament connection, which I'll talk about, which is all about getting loads of people's views. And I'm going to pass it over to Lashini. Lashini will talk a bit about the exact environment side of what we do. We have a campaign that young people up and down the country are taking part of, and we can need your help if you care about the climate. And then Silla will go back exactly what we want from COP26 specifically. So that's exactly how we're going to do it today. Is that okay with everyone? Oh yeah, you can't talk back to me. Oh, I hate this platform. But yes, going from exactly that. What I've found the theme of this conference so far is the importance of coming together. And that's basically the ethos of the Youth Parliament in itself and what we kind of do. The difference from the Youth Parliament and why we need particular voice and I think more funding and more campaigning than other groups is that we don't get a vote. So people who are under the age of 18, they have needs, some of which get passed through the votes by their parents, but a lot of which do not. I'm going to give examples of those later and why we need to have ourselves in action. So this group was set up in the 1960s, not by me. Unfortunately, I was not alive. Sure, before many of you were born also. But we were set up to kind of have that voice. So the way we are made up, we are 11 regions across the UK. So there's London, South East, East of England, North East of England. And within those regions, you have 32 boroughs, for example, in London, you have different regions and constituencies. Like the MP system, we all have a person representing the constituencies. So once upon a time, I was the member for Enfield, and I was elected by my local youth council. So not just was I representative of my group, I was chosen to represent my group. I stood from my school to get onto a youth council, and then from my youth council, other people who stood from their schools then represented their constituency. People representing constituencies all over the country then vote together on issues and policies and try together. So what we basically have here is a system where if I'm talking now, I have been signed a contract saying all the information I'm going to tell you and all the opinions we have basically are from young people themselves. We know it because we've asked them. We are also one of them, so we can ask them in the right ways. We ask our peer, hey mate, lad, what are you thinking of this? We're going to get a better response. And we found this statistically. So we have gone into places like the cabinet and pushed for what we can't vote on. 3 things that we have done in the past. We have, not sure if you heard of Zip card in London. We managed to reinstate that. We've worked with Marcus Rashford. We've also got this food issues back. But also things like mental health is a specific campaign that we have had. We've created a charter. We go up and down schools in the country, understanding what young people think and what schools can do to improve. Mental health is actually a specific one, which demonstrates issues where parents sometimes don't really understand, but we don't get the vote to voice that concern either. So unless we pressure the government about it, things aren't getting done. And I think the environment fits perfectly in the category. Not because people don't care about it, but young people have a specific stake, which I believe, and I think we've had a chat with the other group, a lot of us believe is not getting represented moment. In these talks, we've heard it a couple of times, I've been watching all day, but in the government strategy, I don't think so. So exactly what are these 3 things that young people specifically care about the environment that are different from everyone else? Well, I think it's just the exacerbated factors of a lot of the issues. In a way that we will be here to experience a world where you go on the street and we can't even breathe. So these masks that might be a current temporary thing, Corona, might be permanent for us in the future if we don't do something about climate change now. Poverty, we're seeing the worst situations around at the moment is just going to get worse if we have things like bad food harvests and all the massively inequalities that climate change causes. So we're going to have to experience that. And there's going to be places we can't live, can't even go visit. We're having situations in Australia right now, which might happen across the globe, and that would be our homes. So we are thinking right now, how am I going to get to 50? How can I even plan a career when I have to leave my house running away from fires or have places in the world that I can't live? This might be an issue that people might think of hypothetically and have that passion for, but I think there's something so unique when it's you who's going to have to experience it. So that's the first thing. And the second thing, which is more unique to our generation, is the connective we have found through social media, through more of an international community. So I have a lot of friends abroad just because through texting, through going online, social media. And this means that this kind of like international boundaries that Scylla will go on and talk about later, is not really there for us. We care about global warming more because we have friends in the Seychelles where they are leaving their homes. So we're hearing about this more. And this has also taken away this kind of aspect of you need to look after your country, you need to look after your family, because our families have expanded. So it's more international. Right? We're going to talk about that later in a bit. But it also gives us the idea that this kind of idea that you look after your own first is also out the picture.
Theo, do you know why I'm here?
Because it's...
you got it. Now, I want to hear the debate. I hear what you're saying, and you are great. You are such a good speaker. Be self-aware of there's other people. So let's hear from the other two. Theo, I love you, man. You know I do. But there's only like 20 minutes at the most. So
we will move on.
Let's hear from everyone.
Nashini, hit us up.
Okay, apologies, this is going to be a bit descriptive because I'm kind of outlining what we've already done or what we're in the works of doing. in order to kind of launch our environmental campaign. So to begin with, why did we pick the environment and why is it so important to us? Well, we run a Make Your Mark campaign to gather what issues are most affecting young people across the UK and what they feel most strongly about. And in 2019, there were actually 400,000 votes from young people all across the UK to tackle climate change. So young people want to see practical change that will protect their futures. And that's why it's so important for us to start this campaign now. So as a campaigning group, we kind of began brainstorming how we would want to go about achieving this campaign. And we came to the conclusion of some kind of two-pronged campaign. First of all, to address like the broader effort to make large-scale changes. So that is more addressing the government through perhaps things like letters and protests. And our second aspect of this campaign is also these kind of short-term pragmatic demands that we want from corporations. So at our last meeting, we focused on these corporate small-scale demands, and we began to think of kind of a list of demands that we might want from businesses. And this is more in the sense of how they practically work and small changes that they can make, which could be almost effortless to implement and perhaps not even financially limiting, would make sure they can't even make an excuse and they can't say, well, no, that's not viable for us. So one example I thought of was The Economist recently changed the packaging of their magazines to a recyclable material instead of it being plastic before. And as we know, even small changes can have a great impact on our environment. A particular industry that we were thinking of that we think needs a dire change was the fashion industry, particularly with fast fashion. So example could be asking them to produce clothing with at least 40% of sustainable materials. And these are achievable for companies which already use sustainable materials. Okay, so what are we working on right now? Well, as we know, social media is one of the best tools we have as campaigners, and they can generate huge successes even from the smallest of campaigns. And we realized that we needed to gain leverage on social media to give our cause some credibility and give it a greater likelihood of being accepted by companies. Quick shout out here, if you don't follow us on Twitter or Instagram already, please follow us at London NYPs to support the work we are doing. But we decided to take inspiration from Greenpeace, who have already spoken about plastic packaging. And we kind of decided to use this as our initial initiative to bring people together, to get something we can all do together and perhaps share online. So I began to think of when I walk into a supermarket, you often see fruits and vegetables out, and I began to think of how you sometimes see bananas, and you'll see bananas by themselves, the ones you can just pick off away, take by yourself, and also the ones that are in packaging by themselves, in plastic packaging. And then I thought, well, don't bananas already have some kind of natural packaging? They have a peel. The same thing with oranges, the same thing with lemons. So why are we adding more plastic to them? We're increasing our environmental footprint. It's a small change that we can all make. For example, just picking bananas without plastic as opposed to ones with plastic packaging. And bananas are just one example. There are so many other items. They don't just have to be groceries that perhaps use cardboard instead of plastic. So our initiative, which we're actually launching in March from the 1st to the 7th, and this is going to be coinciding with World Wildlife Day. And we obviously know that plastic waste can have an impact on wildlife, particularly sea life. So if possible, I would really encourage all of you to check our Instagram and our Twitter. We'll be posting more information about this, but all it will be is a simple initiative. Take a picture. This is something you can do as well, considering the lockdown challenges we face. So you can order your groceries online, you can go to the supermarket, just take a quick picture of you buying plastic-free items, so maybe the bananas, as I've said before. Use our hashtag, post it online. We need to get this viral, we need to get this trending, and hopefully we can bring as much awareness as possible. And whilst it may not seem like it's not immediately going to fix our environment, it's just the first of many steps in our mission to create a sustainable future for the planet and for young people. I'm going to hand over to Senna now. I feel like I've been talking for quite a long time. To talk about what we actually want from COP26.
Thanks, Lashini. Well, finally, we're going to talk about COP26. So what do young people want from COP26? I think it's an interesting question. As Theo's clearly demonstrated, we are in fact young people, but we've also done lots of consultation work, and the message from young people isn't changing. So I'm going to try my best to give you a reflection on behalf of my generation of what young people expect to see. And who better to do so than a 17-year-old, right? So what do young people want from COP26? Well, firstly, young people want this conference to be different. We want a seat at the table. Our voices, concerns, ideas to be properly heard. We want world leaders to share the highest sense of urgency we feel when it comes to climate change. We're sick and tired of feeling hopeless and desperately relying on world leaders to be incentivized to actually take action against climate change. And most of all, we no longer want to feel bewildered when some of the most influential and powerful people in the world deny this emergency to even be true. Allow me to show you what this will look like. We've got 3 main demands from COP26, but as I'm sure you can imagine, the list can go on and on and on. Firstly, young people are passionate about initiatives to ensure a sustainably acting future generation. We need mandatory climate education to be implemented in our school curriculums. Explain to your youth of the importance of putting our environment first and about how young people can lead sustainable lifestyles. By doing so, let's globally guarantee a future population of proactively aware leaders committed to take action against climate change. But I'm also aware of the urgent need for more immediate and short-term initiatives so that we don't reach the point of no return and my generation's efforts aren't wasted. I'm really confused with the obsession over national focused observance of an international issue. Why do we have national emission targets? Instead, countries with effective national initiatives for tackling our crisis should allow these brilliant initiatives to be replicated internationally by parting with sponsorship. So as my second point on behalf of young people, countries should be assessed on who is supporting the struggle against climate change the most internationally, not individually. This is going to lead to an increased amount of action taken by countries against climate change, as they'll be judged on an international scale and will have to put in more work to achieve global goals by helping developing countries that cannot afford to take action themselves. Encouraging companies to invest in sustainable foreign infrastructure is a brilliant way to do this. This would also mean that developing countries would have a much more positive impact on the crisis. It will replace our current tedious cycle of countries showing off their national efforts at conferences similar to COP26, while importing most of their products internationally where they were produced from countries with high CO2 emissions. This is counterproductive, and it damages developing countries who are struggling to keep up with some emission expectations and regulations as it is, not to mention that it contributes virtually nothing towards the fight against climate change. Thirdly, all under 18s should receive free travel on public transport. As much as we all collectively believe that public transport is key in our fight against climate change, too many in my generation are in the unfortunate position of not having the privilege to be able to choose what means of transport they would like to use day to day. Many accept lifts from family members, unable to pay such high transport costs as they have no financial means or independence of their own. Free travel means that young people will use public transport more, as we are a generation who are especially concerned with the well-being of our planet. This policy will just allow us to unlock a whole new pathway of opportunity towards tackling climate change. Free travel and the encouragement of public transport that comes alongside it will considerably reduce CO2 emissions, effective immediately. Not only this, but it will also mean that future generations will become increasingly accustomed to regularly using public transport, as they would have done so much more frequently in their youth. By discouraging the use of cars for such frequent trips, like travelling to and from school, we can cut down our emissions massively. On the whole, what young people require is not only clarity and commitment from world leaders, but a seat at the table, so we can be united in our plans to tackle the crisis that we've been facing for so long. The more time that goes by, the more dire this emergency will become. So when COP26 does come around in November, we will be in a more difficult position. This cannot be allowed to continue under any circumstances. It must end here. All eyes will be on COP26, and we know what we want. We know what our planet needs. Free public transport for under 18s, mandatory climate education, and international solutions to an international problem. Make this conference count, please. Thank you.
Wow, well, look, that was amazing, guys. So as far as I'm concerned, the proposals that you've made, you know, write those up and they will be part of the output from the webinar we've been having today. I'm very happy with all of that. The one about mandatory climate education, I mean, I think that's an excellent one. There's been a lot of talk about that. So for me, I think it's a great idea. It needs to be put together, and obviously you folks, you can be a part of that. I mean, I looked at some of this myself. I was very impressed by the NASA course for young people. I don't know if you've seen that. It's some simple modules to build on. But in terms of, I mean, certainly that's something to take a look at. But in terms of the education course, to start to put that together would be a great idea. And I think Gary, we should be asking, we should be uniting and supporting these guys to say, look, there needs to be a more public face of young people at the climate change event. But this one you talked about, Celia, of the national emissions targets. I mean, Theo put this question in advance. I put it to some experts and they never came back to me. But I did ask Ron Israel on the call earlier that we had. Theo, I don't know if you were there. I asked the question of Ron, and Ron said, okay, well, look, if you guys are interested in it, then basically, you know, you work on it. You get together with Ron and do some work on it. So for me, Celia, it's quite a complicated one because we've got a global commitment which is trying to be to a temperature. An individual country, it's difficult to pin them down to a temperature. An individual country can be pinned down to a level of CO2 emissions, which is what the NDCs are trying to do. But I did ask the question of Ron about the, you know, to try and give a rating of, Gary prompted me on this. Gary said, well, which countries are doing well and which aren't? And I asked him the question to say, look, some countries are developing countries like Turkey. Other countries are much more established and trying to reduce CO2 emissions. And other countries are sort of stuck in the middle like China, which is, you know, which has got masses of coal-fired power. So the idea of a sort of rating of who's doing well on the scale, I think is a great idea. It's a great opportunity for you guys to get together with Ron Israel to move it forward. So on the question of what we want from COP26, so Celia, you've outlined it. Anybody else specifically on the subject? Anybody else got any comments, anything else you'd like to say on that one? Lashini, Theo, do you want to add to that at all?
Yeah, I think so. As Celia said, we had originally a list of 10 plus. But the idea, which I think should really come across, is that young people's voice should be at that conference. This isn't just one or two young people. That's just getting delegates from each country to speak to their youth or have youth sit around those tables. Because a lot of the time they will have a lot more urgency. And if it's going to affect people, so normally you'd have a situation which affects mothers. You'd have mothers around the table to share their voice and their experience. This will affect us, and it's important that we're at that conference too. Not us specifically, but young people specifically.
So, Lashini, what do you think?
I think also what's important to address here is there's a feeling among some young people that almost like Greta Thunberg has become the face of young people around climate change. And I think this is dangerous in some sense because you discount the efforts of every other young person out there from such diverse backgrounds that are still trying to fight climate change. And we need to think about also, I know that with some climate change organisations, there's some sense that there's no representation from ethnic minorities and those from lower income backgrounds. And it's important that if we have delegates from regions, from other nations, we can ensure that we're having a range of opinions being heard and they're tailored to young people's needs.
Fantastic. Well, as far as I'm concerned, for what we can do here, we're offering a platform. So the meeting we're having today is the biggest platform, Gary, that we've ever had. Be really pleased to have you guys back. We can give you some topics to talk about. We can encourage you to bring in some more of your colleagues to give more of that diversity and opinion and specialization that we need. But I'd be really pleased to have you folks back. So Gary, what's your take?
I think they should hijack the whole thing. I think the next one you should lead it, because we've got potentially some world leaders here, some politicians, some diplomats, I don't know, but the three of you are amazing people, and I don't think very determined. And it takes, there's a survey and it says, what's the scariest thing in the world? And it wasn't dying, it was speaking publicly. So your nerves before you got on here, there's a real thing, and it's called imposter syndrome. So even at Charles's logic, and he's been doing this forever, we all feel that we're imposters in some way, that we're not. Martin, he this isn't his first rodeo. Even he gets a bit nervous. So I must say that you guys were amazing. You were gripping. Absolutely. I wish I could give you more. So I would suggest to Charles that you hijack this event on the next one. You do it all yourselves, and we just show you the tools. Give a man a fish, he eats for a day. You teach them to fish, they eat for life. So this has taken me years of practice to get to this situation. And Charles is a natural mentor. We want to mentor you to show you how you do this, and you can get a global audience. So how does that sound? Does that sound okay? Can you just hijack it from us?
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah, what we need to do next time is we need to be co-hosting alongside you. We need to be prodding the questions to experts.
Without a doubt. And you see with social media, how you can make something go viral. I'm going to show you. I'm going to absolutely show you how you can make things go viral. Have you heard of a platform called Clubhouse? Not yet.
No.
I was one of the first to be on Twitter, one of the first to be on social Facebook and Instagram. Clubhouse is going to be huge. Clubhouse. Get on there while it's new, before it explodes. Just by invitation only, I'll invite you. So here we go. It's a recap. Look, 5:30 to the end was going to be a recap. I'd love you to stick around and just hear what we're going to say to the end. You guys are amazing. Just amazing.
Thank you.
So final words from you folks. Celia, you like to say anything else?
I'd just like to re-emphasize what Lashini, Theo and I have just said. Like, just please listen to us, because we're here too. Just because we can't vote for you doesn't mean our opinions aren't valid. Listen to us, give us a seat at the table, because our opinions are worthwhile.
We're doing this for you. Theo?
Yeah, on me, it's just we have our campaigns going on as young people, and they're national. So watch this space. Follow our Instagram, as Lashini said, because we have so many projects coming up. So join us on them struggles.
Nice.
Well, tell us, keep us informed about your campaigns, and if you'd like to incorporate some planting trees as part of your campaigns, guys, we'd be really pleased to do that, because the point is, it's so easy to donate to plant trees. You can plant a few, you can plant a lot, and we're putting up on the screen here behind Gary that if people donate £30, then you get 270 trees, and you create nearly 3 days of paid work for people in extreme poverty. So your £30 is, you can look at it either way. You do the trees, you're helping people with poverty, or you do the whole lot and you help create new habitats as well.
Now I know that look. Martin's looking. He's going to plant a word of wisdom on it. I know that look. And Stefan was about to plant some words of wisdom on us.
No, if you allow me to speak, it's actually the words of wisdom from these 3 young people on the screen. And what I loved, it made my heart sing to hear this idea about countries coming together and seeing how they can contribute internationally rather than doing things on their own national bit. We should be coming together and saying, what can we do to sort of make the UN work? What can we do to make these things work? Not just saying what our little bits are and fighting about it. That really is good. So I brought my face back on to be able to say that. I hope that goes the right direction. Thank you.
If I could just jump in quickly here, I would just like to say a few words, like directed at any young person that's watching this, because I think don't underestimate yourself. We're on here because we've been given this opportunity, and we're so thankful for that. But I always find the work that I do, especially as a representative of young people, to act as, in a sense, as a legacy. You have the power that we have. We're no different from you. So please speak up like we have today. And use your talent, use your voice. There's so much talent out there. I'm speaking to you at home, sitting, watching this on your laptop. I know you, young person. Thank you for listening to us, and you can do this yourself.
I just want
Thank
to.
you. Right, Gary, we've overrun. Bring it on. We need some more speakers.
Bring it on. We need some more speakers. We need some more speakers. I'm afraid to say we're at the end.
I had a question.
Go for it, Stefan.
So, I mean, COP26 is in Scotland, November 1st. I mean, do we all meet there?
Yeah.
Okay, that would be nice. I'd love to meet you guys.
I was going to say, and I agree with Charles, we do need more speakers. And I agree with Stefan that we should get there somehow. And you've inspired me to think how this happens, ripple effect. So if you're doing something small, it has an effect somewhere else. And if I hadn't met Charles at a motivational speaking event, and he stood up and he inspired me to go over to him to talk, and I was kind to somebody, and they said they brought us together. And if that person hadn't brought us together, then we wouldn't be here. And if I never knew Theo, if Theo hadn't come up to me when he was barely 15, and then Charles wouldn't have had the link. And you see how it all starts to connect together. You have to take action to make it go forward. Sitting at home, doing nothing doesn't get you close to your goals. So I really am feeling super inspired. We've been going for 6.5 hours. We worked through the night. We putting this all together. And I feel absolutely energized at what I'm hearing here. And Charles, you're a genius to end with the young people. Genius.
Gary, there's a space to say that on the 3 demands, the free public transport for young people, that should be easily done. I mean, I've had 3 free public transport since I was 60, which is a long time, 7 years ago, in London. And it's incredibly useful. It actually has made me use public transport more rather than using cars and so forth. It's a really win-win, and it's a no-brainer. So I'm just wanting to support that as well. I think that's...
Or a free bike. Chuck that in as well. We may waste enough money on nonsense. Charles, what was your...
Gary, can we bring in Heather Goldstone?
Absolutely. I'll do that. I'll bring her in.
We need Mark.
Yeah.
And we need Clover Hogan as well, Gary.
Okay. What were your I'll put all those people in. How did you what was your hope for the end? It was 5:30 concluding session.
This is such an important session. This is bringing it all together. Next steps. Martin's done the biz. Thank you, Martin, with the points. So we need the speakers on to ask the really hard questions now. What about going forward? And so once you get the speakers on the screen, Martin, Gary.
I'll try.
So, well, I hope everybody had a great, while we're waiting for Gary, I hope everybody's had a fantastic day. I've had an amazing time. The speakers, well, I knew they were going to be good. The speakers have blown me away in terms of what they've said, what they've asked for, and their amazing professionalism. So we've had an incredible day. We want to bring it all together in making it available to people as replays. We want to bring it together in terms of the actions that have been talked about. And we've still got time to put all this together for COP26, because that's the whole benefit of having the event at the beginning of the month. So we could have another event. We certainly bring the paperwork together. I think we need an event to summarize the actions. So it's just such an important task we're starting off on, and I would appeal to people, to anybody who would like to volunteer to help us, because this is a big task. And also, of course, anybody who would like to help things move forward by donating to plant some trees, that would be absolutely amazing. So Gary, you've got as far as getting Heather onto the screen.
Not everyone has your stamina, Charles. Some people are going to watch the recording.
We've got to have Mark.
We have everyone that we have.
We need Mark Trexler.
Mark might have left.
No, he's still here.
All right, Mark. Yeah, you're right.
Promote the panelist.
Move to panelist. Okay.
I'm just promoting the panelist.
I'm going to make you the host, Charles. And then if I make you the host, then you can promote people too.
What's happened to Clover? Clover. Promote to panelist. Great.
Now you're the host. You can do what you like.
So Heather, can we unmute you? Ask to unmute.
So
guys, can we unmute? Can we unmute, please, for Heather, Clover, and Mark? Heather, we can see you. Hi. Mark?
Yeah, I'm here.
Great. We just need you on camera, please.
Yeah,
And
I don't.
Clover, please, on camera.
Oh, here we are. Sorry, it did appear. Oh, I cannot start your video because the host has stopped it.
That's for you, Gary.
That's for me. I'll do that. But moments of silence aren't very good, especially when you're watching. Does somebody have, while we're doing the technical stuff, please give us some feedback on how you found the day. How can we improve it? What should be the next date? Should we do this on the 15th of every month until COP? How does that sound? 15th every month, 1.5 max.
What I think we should do, Gary, is after hearing this, we should make like a transcript, a letter of some sorts of all the points, all the recommendations, the asks we're getting. Then from that, we can go around and get people to sign it. Maybe we can go reach a target like 100,000, let's say. We could pass it to loads of young people, get as many ministers, maybe even MPs to sign it. And it is our ask, and we can send it to our delegates or even our government.
Great idea.
Mark, you're on screen. Great. Heather, we just need you to unmute. Clover?
Yep.
Need you to unmute as well, please. Clover! Fantastic. So, sorry about the technical interregnum there. But first of all, really want to thank you, Theo, Theo, Sela and Lashini for your contribution. Excellent. Let's talk again. And big welcome to our final session now, where we pull everything together around what next. And so I'd like to welcome to the panel, we've got Heather Goldstone from the Woodwell Climate Research Centre, Mark Trexler from the Climatographers, and Clover Hogan from Climate Activist and your own organisation. So let's just do the intros first. Of the three of you, who'd like to kick off? Heather, would you like to start? Well, first of all, let me say we met on the panel back in April when we were talking about coronavirus and the impact of that. There's been quite a lot of mention of that today. We're in a different situation now, except that there's got more coronavirus and a lot more money has been spent. But the world has changed since we last spoke. There's been a lot of positive things happening. So Heather, over to you for your intros, please.
Sure, and I will keep this brief. I'm Heather Goldstone. I'm Chief Communications Officer at Woodwell Climate Research Center, which is a relatively new term for me. Actually, it's been almost exactly a year since I started with the center. And before that, I spent about a decade as a journalist, a radio journalist, specifically focused on science, and a lot of that focused on climate change and trying to really tell effective science-based stories, human stories around science. And so my work now is the next chapter there, and trying to use storytelling and put our science at the center into action to drive the kinds of change that we need. And I'm glad to be here with you today, and was able to hear the last several minutes of the previous session. Really just the energy and the determination, so inspiring and so motivating. So I'm glad to be here with you today.
Thank you. Mark, over to you, please.
Okay. I'm Mark Trexler. I'm in Portland, Oregon in the US. I started working on climate change at the World Resources Institute in Washington, DC 33 years ago, and have been too stupid to get out of the field since then. And what I've basically done is worked in a consulting role with companies and organizations and NGOs around the world on all sorts of things for that period of time. But I've sort of switched gears recently to think about climate change as a communications problem and as a knowledge management problem. And I'll admit I did not come on at 4 in the morning my time, but I did come on to start listening at about 6 in the morning my time. So I've heard many of the sessions, and I think one thing that people, it's very easy to forget how much work has happened in this space over the 30 plus years that lots of people have been working on these issues. And we do an enormous amount of reinventing of the wheel across almost every conceivable climate change topic. And at the end of the day, that wastes an enormous amount of time. And so, thinking forward to COP26, my hope on the one hand, it's very easy to say, oh yes, hopefully the governments of the world will decide to actually solve climate change. We've been waiting for that for 26 COPs, of which I've attended maybe 15. And so I'm not particularly sanguine that happens at this COP. What I really hope to see is that all of the great people working on this topic start to really think about how to collaborate in this area and not just be independent silos working on this issue. I call it climate chess. And if we were playing climate chess, we might actually be able to solve climate change as opposed to all of us just being individual pawns running around the board.
Right. Fantastic, Mark. So that's the introduction. We're going to ask you more about that in a minute. But Clover, really pleased to have you on the panel. Again, we want to represent younger people on the panel. But I know that you've done a lot of interviews with really high-powered people. And so I'm really hoping that you're bringing to all of this some energy from all of those people we've spoken to and their insights that you've brought together into your own activities. So please, over to you to introduce yourself.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity. I love your background, by the way, Charles. It's nice to see some greenery. So I'm Clover Hogan. I'm the founder and executive director of an international organization called Force of Nature. We have a student network in over 50 countries, and our mission is to really mobilize my generation to step up rather than shut down in the face of the climate crisis. So I've been working on climate since I was about 11 years old, and my obsession is climate psychology. So understanding how we respond by way of mindset to this existential threat and the power of mindset and the stories that we subscribe to, our thoughts, our feelings, our actions, on being able to deliver a world and a future that we all know is possible. We work directly with young people to really cultivate mindsets of agency and resilience and determination. We also work with an enabling ecosystem of leaders across business, across policy, civil society, working with Fortune 500 companies like PepsiCo and Unilever and P&G, as well as many of the decision makers involved in processes like COP, to bring together the energy of youth with the knowledge of experience. So delighted to be here today, and thank you for having me.
So Clover, we might have got some a load of volunteers from you from the last talk, the young people there, and it sounds as if they know a lot of other people in the Youth Parliament who also might like to help you. So I hope that's helping. But in the first session, we had Ryan Hagan from Crowdsourcing Sustainability, and he really fired us up with his keynote, where he said at COP26, politicians need to go beyond what is politically feasible. So I really think we've got to be talking about, it's outside the envelope, however you want to put it. We need to be talking about more than logically we might be expecting to do there. So Heather, do you want to start us off with that one? Let's talk about the COP26 things and then come back a bit to what your own organizations are doing. But how would you respond to that? What would you want to see from COP26 in terms of politicians going beyond what's politically feasible?
Well, I think first of all, and I appreciate the perspective that we can't just be stuck in our national silos, but I think the work of COP26 needs to start not at COP26, but significantly before, and particularly here in the US. It needs to start, and we expect it to start next week, with the US rejoining the Paris Agreement rejoining the international community and the international effort, and not just rejoining, but really taking a leadership role. And I don't mean leadership in the sense of trying to take over, but the United States, as one of the largest emitters and one of the wealthiest nations in the world, has both an opportunity and an obligation to really step up and be a leader in climate action, and to help, bring others along, and float all boats. So I think that's, in my mind, one of the most important things for this year is just making sure that the U.S. is at COP26 and playing the role that it needs to be. And I'm very optimistic that we will see that happen with the new administration that, is really already with the members of the new administration that we've seen announced, really making climate science and climate action a priority at all levels throughout the government. And I think that's another really important thing, is to start really seeing climate policy become more pervasive and not, to Mark's point, not sitting in its own silo of this is climate over here and this is everything else over here. It needs to be transportation and housing and all of our different policies, for that matter, not just government, but as Clover was saying, and Mark, private business, governments at all levels, and individuals. We can't do this with people being acting in silos and individuals, and this is what everyone else has been saying as well, right? But we really need everyone, every sector of our society, and not just pursuing one solution, not thinking about this as an either or. Do I, ride my bike, or do I plant a tree? Do I purchase this way or vote this way? It really needs to be all of the above. We have to be doing all of those things at this point. We are, the science increasingly tells us, closer and closer to really alarming tipping points in our climate system, to points of irreversible change. And so, to your original question, Charles, we absolutely need to be going into COP26 and coming out of COP26 with much higher ambition and much greater momentum than we've had to date. And I will just highlight one thing that we're really focused on in our organization and highlighting based on our science is that we really need to be paying a lot more attention to the Arctic, and in particular to the problem of thawing permafrost and the greenhouse gas emissions that are released as that previously frozen ground thaws. That's one of those tipping points, and has the potential as the Arctic thaws and starts to release more of these greenhouse gases to overwhelm our efforts to control the climate by reducing our emissions from fossil fuels. And so that's a problem that we need a lot more attention on. It has the potential to completely rework the carbon budgets that we're basing our ambition on. And what that science tells us is we need to be far more ambitious, acting faster and more dramatically to reduce our fossil fuel emissions.
Okay, so the question of what politicians to go beyond what's politically feasible. Would Mark or Clover, would you like to come in on that one?
Sure. To me, it brings up a word that a lot of people may not have heard yet. It was just invented last year, not by me. But the word is green wishing, and as opposed to green washing. Green wishing is not green washing. But the idea that politicians need to go beyond what's politically feasible really is green wishing, in the sense that it sounds great and we all wish it would happen, but it's very hard to see how that actually happens, as opposed to making something that we want to see, making it politically feasible, and then the politicians can actually do it. But we tend to go into these conferences of the parties with enormous amounts of green wishing. And at some point, Albert Einstein is supposed to have said, he didn't actually say it, but he's supposed to have said that one definition of insanity is continuing to do the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. At some point, we need to rethink some of our approaches to tackling this problem. And be very cognizant of all of the work that's out there already on things from carbon pricing to activism to climate psychology. I mean, there are enormous amounts of work already out there that have accumulated, and we ought to be taking the best possible advantage of all of that work.
Okay, well, that sounds like a whole discussion in itself, Mark. So we do need to talk about how to implement that, because we're clearly wasting time if we are just going around the same old cycle again. Do you want to give us just a couple of quick action points that give people a hint as to where we should be going on that, and then suggest further discussion? So give us a hint as to how to move that one forward.
Well, I'll point you to something that you've seen a little bit of Charles. We started building a number of years ago something we call the climate web, and it was in response to a quote from one of the mothers of knowledge management, Carla Odell, and she just has a great quote: "If only we knew what we know," and it's really true when it comes to climate change. We know so much, but each of us individually, it's hard for us to get our heads around even a micro slice of what we collectively know. And so we've been building the climate web. It's a massive online open access knowledge resource, theclimateweb.com. But we're now experimenting with other ways of organizing that information that aren't as terrifying, frankly, as the massive climate web. And so if you go to climatesites.net, you'll see a whole series of things where we're extracting very specifically topical information from the climate web and presenting it as a easier to access website. And so you can go to cop26.climatesites.net, and we'll be tracking sort of a lot of stuff leading up to COP26 there. So we're just trying to experiment with different ways of helping people access sort of the infinite information that's already out there.
Okay, so Clover, I've been ticked off by saying we should not be asking for what's politically feasible, because it's greenwashing. So let's give you the floor. You tell us what you think about COP26, and okay, no greenwashing, yeah?
So I attended COP21 and most recently COP25 as well. And I'm always frustrated by the inconsistencies and the hypocrisy within the conference itself. So even the fact that, last year I was on a panel, the year before I was on a panel with Pat O'Brown, founder of Impossible Foods, the company I used to work at. We're talking about the huge overhaul that is needed within, animal agriculture, the obvious need to move away from red meat, and people are, walking around with Burger King burgers. I think there's really, really blatant inconsistency and hypocrisy. And in the next COP, I want to see an end to that. I want to see an end to the platforming and posturing of companies that sing super pretty tunes about the commitments that they're making into the future that are so far out that they require no immediate action. So I think, to the point that's been raised previously, what I want to see of COP is not, a culmination, a sudden tipping point, but really just a showcase of all of the work that has already been done, because we can't afford to keep postponing to future convenings and future meetings to make the decisions that matter. The work is already going in. The work needs to be happening on a much larger scale. And critically, I talk a lot about young people being involved, but more generally, stakeholders who have historically been left out of these rooms where decisions are being made need to have a seat at the table, not because it's a nice thing to do, but because it's essential if we want to see grassroots mobilizing and if we want to see these solutions actually rolling out on the ground. So I would say less posturing, less greenwash and greenwashing, to Mark's point, and more representation of the very people who are already experiencing the impacts of the climate crisis are in fact best placed to also solve it.
Okay, well, that's thank you for that, Clover. Let's now take a look, if we may, at what your organisation is doing. Each of your organisations is doing. What are you doing? What do you see as the key factors? Heather, you've already mentioned some in terms of the Arctic. So what's your organisation doing? What are the key things that are going on? And how does that really play into COP26? So let's start with with you, Heather. So you've talked about the Arctic as being a problem. So the solution to the Arctic is that not reducing CO2 in the air, or is it something else?
No, it's absolutely reducing greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. It's reducing the sources of emissions that we directly control as rapidly as we possibly can before the sources of emissions that we're kicking off, but we don't directly control, right? We have no way to turn off the tap on emissions from permafrost thaw. We can't just go up and, refreeze that. That's not currently technology we have, although I have seen some conversations about, could we stick, things into the soil to try to refreeze the Arctic, right? The tool the lever that we have is really what it is reducing our fossil fuel emissions to stop that. And that's not the only one of these kind of natural sources of greenhouse gas emissions that we're potentially looking at. I mean, just earlier this week, one of our scientists was a co-author on a study that came out, you may have read about it, showing that we could be looking at in the next 2 to 3 decades, a halving of the amount of carbon dioxide that could be taken up by forests globally, because again, the impacts of climate change on these forests and the inability of biology to just cope with the climate that we are creating. And again, the solution there is to avoid reaching that point by reducing our greenhouse gas emissions.
Okay.
So, our role, we're a research organization. Our role, and I think to Mark's point, yes, we know so much. Unfortunately, there are still some really big questions that we don't have answers to. And so part of our role is to really hone in on what are those big questions, and start making sure that we're aware of what we don't know, what we need to know, and what the implications of that could be, and to pursue those answers and make people aware of them. So those are two that we're really focused in on right now, is, as I said, the problem of permafrost thaw in the Arctic, and then also really looking at, with not a greenwishing or a greenwashing, but a very critical look at the role of natural climate solutions of soils and forests to be able to help remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, put it back where it belongs, in storage, in deep storage, hopefully, and to make that a really realistic tool, not one that, as Mark said, is either greenwished or greenwashed.
It was your organization's 2016 paper that really fired me up about the potential for forests, where you talk about that out of those numbers really comes the 10% per annum CO2 removed that's possible by forests. Now, what about soils? I mean, do you have some more amazing numbers, some soils that could make a difference? Do you have another 10%, Heather, from soils?
Let me just interject just for a second. Yeah. What you don't know about Charles and I, we studied integrity for nearly 3 months. The speakers have agreed to speak till 6 o'clock. If you have to go, please don't feel bad. Don't feel like, because we want you to come back again. What we don't want is you think, oh, I agreed to 6 and I was there till 7. That's not the case. I got a little bit carried away with the young people's energy, and we were 10 minutes late. So this is on me. I'm disciplining myself. We managed to keep in time for 6.5 hours, and we messed up on the last one. So with all integrity, the next 10 minutes, if you have commitments, family commitments, if you have something to do, please don't feel bad. This is on me. So I just felt that I had to say, as we both care about integrity, and we were very respectful of your time. You're busy people doing busy things, important things. Heather, back over to you. Sorry, I really needed to get that off my chest.
Yeah, and with that in mind, I want to be really, really brief and make sure that Mark and Clover get their due. And we'll just say that, we have continued at Woodwell Climate to study the potential and to work with colleagues at a number of organizations and around the world to really dig into this issue of what can natural systems do for us, and how do we enhance that. And we've found some amazingly encouraging things, like the fact that just allowing forests to regrow naturally on their own can be incredibly powerful, that natural climate solutions have the potential to provide perhaps up to a third of the emissions reductions that we need in the next couple of decades. But at the same time, we're finding these alarming threats to the potential of natural climate solutions as well. And so maybe can about these, but then also, you know, the main message that we're getting from all of this is we need to be moving more quickly and more dramatically. We only reach the maximum potential of natural climate solutions if we start now. And so I think that's the biggest message, is we need to start now.
Okay, so Mark or Clover, who'd like to go next?
Clover, do you want to go?
Sure thing. So a lot of the work that we're doing is really around the role for intergenerational exchange. You know, we saw how the youth strikes for climate in 2019 were a huge force for action. And I know as well, working in boardrooms, that often when asking business leaders why they were there, why they were talking about climate change, it was because one of their kids came home at the end of the day and asked, you know, Mom, Dad, what are you doing about this climate crisis? So there is a huge role for intergenerational exchange, and really what we're doing within Force of Nature is looking at how to institutionalize youth engagement and how to institutionalize that intergenerational kind of forum. So we're working heavily with the Climate Champions team led by Nigel Topping and other groups and other convening bodies to actually mobilize young people already within organizations, and also how to give platform to and create space for young people who are experiencing the direct impacts of the climate crisis as we speak, who have a lot to say about how this is impacting us right now. I think one of the issues, obviously, with climate communication has been that the science and the data, to your point, Mark, can be hugely overwhelming, and it feels it's very easy to feel like you're way too small to comprehend or act on any of it as a single individual. But of course, in bringing together a real diversity of experiences and backgrounds, especially from frontline communities, Indigenous communities, we can begin to really pave toward that alternative future. And one thing I would like to kind of end on this point is that we're very good at articulating the problems. We're very good at articulating what it is that we're working against. And yet we have a bit of a crisis in imagination when it comes to what it is that we're working toward. And that is why it's so important that we really uphold and platform the solutions that are myriad to the climate crisis. And part of the reason I adore the work of Project Drawdown, the most comprehensive set of climate solutions proposed to date, it shows us what is possible, it shows us what is visible and what already exists. So that is championing nature, that is ending the continued exploitation and degradation of our environmental world, and that is, of course, not divorcing communities from the environment. We won't deliver climate action, we won't deliver protected environments if we don't first deliver social, equitable communities where people are really looked after. So within our community, the environmental community, the climate community, we have to think of climate action and climate justice as the flip side of social justice. So that is the year ahead for us, and really inviting in the voices that have historically been left to the margins.
So Clover, let me ask you the question. If people don't know, Nigel Topping is the UK lead envoy on climate. You're talking to Nigel Topping about young people. We've just had 3 young people on the last panel who are saying that they feel they're not going to be represented at COP26. So are you able to do the deal with Nigel Topping to get some young people
Definitely,
in the front line at COP26, Clover? Task for you.
For sure, yeah. Nigel is a huge proponent of championing youth voices, and each year with COP, we've seen young people begin to shift from just kind of being tokenized and being paid lip service to really being invited into the decision-making process. And so COP26, we really want to see youth voices centered, because there is so much innovation and energy and determination that comes from this generation that is necessary when we have a lot of leaders who have been part of the systems and part of creating the systems for so long that they find it very, very difficult to gain objectivity or get outside of them to imagine what those alternatives look like. And when the climate crisis is ultimately a symptom of those broken systems, we need new visions and ideas, and we need to see what those alternatives look like. So in answer to your question, absolutely, Charles, we'll just have to put them in touch.
Okay, so let's come over to Mark now for his comments, and then let's go around everybody with some specifics for 2 or 3 things after that, 2 or 3 things that you actually want from COP26. So Mark, there's so much to talk about. Floor's yours.
Okay, you know, I think from my perspective, it's really great to see sort of the expansion of interest that we've seen in 2020 from all the different young people's groups that are out there, et cetera. And you know, my thought is that, and if we can avoid reinventing the wheel, we can help those people be far more effective when they go to COP26, et cetera. You know, just to give one example in terms of what Heather was bringing up in terms of the natural climate solutions, you know, we've been working on, the Royal We and me personally have been working on those things for more than 30 years. We've been talking about tropical forest conservation and reforestation and regeneration for close to 50 years. We've been talking about carbon pricing for 30 years. So, you know, we've been talking about these things ad infinitum. And with natural climate solutions, we can argue that the potential is huge. But as Heather points out, you know, climate change itself is going to shut down an awful lot of natural climate solutions. And we're going to be lucky to keep a lot of the natural systems that we have as the climate warms. And so to argue whether natural climate solutions is the answer is just the wrong approach. We do need to be doing as many things as we can, but the key point is that we can't all be doing everything. People have limited time, they have limited resources, they need help in figuring out where they can actually make an impact. And that's sort of our idea behind the game of climate chess.
Okay, so in the UK, we've had this Citizens Assembly. There's a report out by the Citizens Assembly, and a lot of it makes common sense. The people were chosen by statistical process and everything. You can read the report all about it. There's really great stuff. But there were people who briefed, there were experts who briefed the Climate Assembly. Now, what they briefed, I've not seen what they briefed, but Mark, what I'm hearing from you is that what you've got in your database is potentially this is the brief. You've got in your database, you've got that sort of brief for people. So what about the idea of creating that specifically into a brief for people that people can look at? So this becomes a briefing for anybody who wants to know what they're supposed to be thinking and saying and at COP26. Is it possible to do that? Does that help?
Well, and based on our original conversation, Charles, you know, as you've seen, we're sort of experimenting with doing just that, and we're calling it microsites, sort of a one-page brief on different topics. And we have COP26, we have individual action, we have carbon offsets, we have a number of different sort of one-page briefs right now, and they're all at microsites.climatesites.net, and so we're totally open to that idea. And then we also show people how they can dig deeper into those topics if they want to in the larger knowledge base.
Okay, super. Well, let's come back to the big question then. The big question of what do we want from COP26? So who'd like to go first with two or three big actions? So we've dropped the term greenwashing, we've dropped the term politically feasible, and Clover's put on the table crisis of imagination. So fantastic. So in terms of breaking the crisis of imagination, 2 or 3 things for COP26, please. Who's going to go first?
I'll start very quickly, very shortly. You know, there are supposed to be some big decisions at COP26, including sort of market mechanisms and the role of carbon offsets, et cetera. And what I would really hope for COP26 is that we not confuse sort of a plan, or we not confuse sort of grand declarations with the likelihood of climate change mitigation. You know, we have lots of carbon pricing around the world. it's having very little impact on emissions. We have lots of market mechanisms around the world. It's having very little impact on climate change. And so as COP26 does its work, we really need to be thinking about, is this just sort of show, or is this truly likely to translate into reduced emissions and mitigation?
Okay, so I mean, just to, on that one, we had James Collis talking earlier, and I mean, he's saying, for example, that Brexit would make it easier for the UK to have our own carbon pricing mechanism with border adjustment, etc., etc. So surely, if we brought all of the UK together into that, surely that would, okay, we're a relatively small country, but surely that would actually make a difference.
If the UK by itself does carbon pricing, no, it won't make any difference, unless it does it in a way that helps demonstrate the concept to others. And that's what we need a lot more of, is successful demonstrations of material changes.
It would be demonstrating, yeah. Okay, right. So who's next?
I'm happy to jump in.
Clover.
So 3 things. The first would be, often when capitalism comes into the conversation, it's often laughed out the door because, you know, who are a bunch of wacky socialists to be talking about these systems that have delivered such prosperity and development. And yet we realize that ultimately, you know, so much of what is underpinning this crisis is a system of capitalism based on limitless growth with finite resources. And as so many exciting new economic models come through, such as Kate Raworth's donut, we see that we do need to be creating systems that allow us to work within planetary boundaries and not at opposition with or commodifying nature so that the tree is more valuable when it's dead than when it's alive, but creating systems where we're really working with Mother Nature. And of course, that's part of the real struggle. And what I've witnessed, you know, working with business leaders is often they feel the least powerful of all, because they too are shackled to that system where they're having to relentlessly deliver value to shareholders. They're meeting the 9-to-5 expectations, and they're in this, you know, hyper-consumptive kind of growth model. We saw, you know, when Ben & Jerry's registered as a B corporation, how immediately there was pushback from the shareholders saying, what do you mean you're going to prioritize climate action and stakeholders over ultimately delivering wealth? So when we look at business, which is such a major part of this conversation, I really, really hope of COP26 that, you know, we have those conversations about the systems that are underpinning this crisis, and that those conversations about what a post, you know, growth capitalism society actually looks like are not laughed out the door. In addition, you know, my experience of COP previously is that the 100 companies that are responsible for 71% of emissions have often been allowed to stay out of the conversation, or to, worse yet, use the platform of COP26 to kind of promote their own greenwash. So I want to see those companies held to account. I want to see their leaders, you know, in the light, but really being grilled, and people demanding of them what those commitments look like, and what those commitments are that have already been delivered on. You know, no more by 2050, by 2030. We can't afford another 10 years of incrementalism. And then finally, on the role of mindset, seeing everyone who enters into that space, into the green room, into the blue room, to think about the stories that they're entering with. You know, we all subscribe to stories about the world and about our role in it. Often those stories tilt toward being too small to make a difference, or the system being too broken to change. I want us to all go in with the mindset of what is possible, what we are capable of as individuals, and more powerfully, back to the starting point, what we're capable of when we come together in collective and actually break out of those silos.
Wow. Can you just give us a couple of pointers on the post-growth capitalism? Do you want to just give us a couple of pointers to people we should be looking at, or articles or whatever? What's your favorite model here?
Sure. So I used to work with an amazing fellow, John Elkington, who is the first person to kind of be called Greenpeace and Stripes, because he was the first eco-activist to really start engaging with businesses. He came up with triple bottom line theory back in the 80s, looking at how companies really need to shift from a single bottom line model to not just account for their impact, but to really think about how they're creating value for people and the planet. He's done some great work around tomorrow's capitalism, around the green swans model. So looking at positive tipping points in addition to negative tipping points, and how we really need to rethink the role of business, shifting from, delivering products and services without regard for unintended consequences as the kind of end goal, to instead thinking, how are those products and services vehicles for solving bigger societal and environmental problems? And anyone else who is a nerd for this stuff, definitely check out regenerative economics, the models of regenerative business. That's where we again shift from how do we mitigate the problems to actually how do we replenish what has already been lost? How do we begin to draw down, sequester more carbon from the atmosphere? How do we begin to restore the very carbon sinks that are so critical to being able to deliver on those climate targets?
Super, Clover, fantastic. So we need to round off soon. So Heather, you've got the floor for the last session on what do you want from COP26?
First of all, I'll go back to my first point and say I want to see the work start now, not at COP26, and I want to see everyone who is there coming to the table. And this is Clover's point from earlier, coming to the table with what they've already done, what they are doing, not just what they will do. And again, to build on what Clover has been saying and what all of the panelists from the previous panel, the point that was made there, in Paris, when we got this really unprecedented agreement and a goal that many thought would never actually be written down on paper, that was because the global South and small island developing nations in particular made their voices heard. They could not be ignored. And so I would like to see at COP26 the voices of youth, of marginalized people, of the wisdom of indigenous people really listened to, really reckoned with and acted on. And I guess maybe this is green wishing, Mark, but what I would really hope is that what we can work toward is less of the us versus them or different groups in different silos. At Climate Week I guess 2019, the last one that was in person, I had a very stark experience going between different events at that one place where there were business leaders in one place and politicians in one place, and there were youth activists in another. And we really all need to be in the same room, not the decision makers inside the room and the voices of youth outside the room protesting and demanding action, but really in the room at the table. And so getting those voices, that wisdom, that motivation, that energy actually at the table.
Fantastic, thank you. Okay, so Gary's going to tell us we've massively overrun. Myself, I could talk with you folks for a lot longer, but let's just have some final comments from this last panel. Who'd like to say some final words on what we need to be doing?
Well, Charles, I'm going to actually, I will cede my time to Clover in the interest of not overrunning further and of amplifying the voices of youth that need to be heard. So thank you all so much for having me here.
Clover, got more floor.
I don't think I should have more floor. No, thank you so much, Heather. That's very kind. I would just say that as individuals, tuning into today, don't underestimate what you're capable of. There's a really dominant kind of narrative that it's both your fault that we have climate change because it's up to individual decisions, but also you're only capable of getting rid of, plastic disposable coffee cups and turning off the lights when you leave a room. And in fact, we really need to shift out of that kind of tokenism of activism to thinking about what we are, each and every one of us, possible of changing and creating when we assume individual responsibility, when we take individual initiative. And I know how overwhelming the climate crisis can feel when we spread ourselves thin across lots of different issues. We go on social media and we see 100 different things that we're meant to care about kind of flying at us. And in fact, as any change maker, I believe in history would tell us, impact really comes from focus. Looking at this 7.8 billion piece puzzle and thinking, which is my place, which is the problem that I want to solve, and connecting with like-minded people who are already solving those issues. The problems are myriad, but so too are the solutions. So find the people who are working on them, amplify their work, and think about all of the unique skills and talents and gifts that you bring to the table to be able to solve those problems. It is possible, but we need to keep that future in mind and in hand as we continue to take steps forward.
Thank you so much. So Mark, you've got the last word here.
Well, just to amplify a little bit what Clover said, I think the what if people, instead of just figuring out what problem they want to work on, which is great, but what if we could borrow people from different pieces of the puzzle to work on another piece of the puzzle, which at that particular point in time, we have an opportunity to make a big difference on. And if we could take some of the people with particular skill sets from over here and apply them to this problem over there, even though it's not the problem that they might be most passionate about. Just imagine how much more strategically and tactically we could approach this issue. And that's very difficult for people to do on their own. They need to be empowered with information and insight. And nobody's really doing that right now. And I wish we could.
Okay, so thank you so much. I just round off by saying thank you to our amazing speakers, all with speakers we've had today, all 20 speakers, to this final panel, which has been absolutely amazing. In terms of what we can do, Gary, speaking for you and I here, I want to make the commitment this year to a couple of things. And one of them is that I want to make a commitment to COP26, making a difference. For me, the 1.5 degrees to be agreed at COP is really, really important. And I want also to make this platform here, these discussions, these groups, we can run these, Gary, we can do these sessions, we can have more speakers. If it makes a difference, we can get people together for the prior discussions, the different groups that people have talked about. I can't do it all myself. I need help from other people to do it, but absolutely we can make this platform available. In terms of the individual action, the whole purpose of planting trees was to give an action that people can do and to give back to the community. And I want to acknowledge the role of Heather's organisation in inspiring me to the sort of numbers that are possible with planting trees, and in particular planting mangroves, which we do. So thank you, Heather and Woodwell, for that. And Mark, what you're doing with your your databases, I think there's huge potential there in making information available to people in terms of what we can do going forward. So I'm really keen to progress what we've learned today in terms of actions. So anybody, participants, the panelists, people online, if anybody wants to make contact with myself and Gary, please do, about more ideas about what we can do. And we'd be really pleased to have you panelists here today back again, because there's so much more that I want to talk about with you all, and I'm sure there's so much more where we can make a difference. So that's my point, Gary.
Very well said, Charles. Very well said. So
over to you, Gary.
It's been 6.5 hours, and it's gone around the globe. My intention here is, like Charles, let's really make a difference. If we can recover in time on the 15th of February, potentially we could be doing this again. And acknowledge everyone, but most of all Charles. He's worked tirelessly to put this together. I think at least a round of applause, the very minimum from certainly me, because Charles, you've been amazing. You've coordinated this, You've been organised. You've been on top of me for sure. So, and you really, however much, if I could hug you, I'd hug you over the internet, sir. So, thank you very, very much, Charles. You really are an inspiration. You all are inspirational. Heather, I read your email. There's not many emails I look forward to, but I'm part of your newsletter. Clover, my God, mindset is, if we can get the mindset right. Mark, I acknowledge you for the length of time that you've been working on this project. And it's only now, like I've been working with Charles for nearly 2 years. 2 years ago, this hardly made any news in the newspaper certainly not on the main news, on the news headlines. It hardly made anything. But now we've brought this to the forefront. So wrapping that up, Charles, thank you. Everybody, thank you. All the people that have participated. But do you know who's the most important people are the people that have been watching this. Please, if you're watching this, just tell a friend. Say, hey, do you know, I watched this thing and it was quite good. And we could actually make a difference by doing just very small things. And I think that's the answer. So a good night, a safe weekend to you all. And I think the wind of change, I can feel it on my neck. But there you go, and it's coming from America. I can feel it. All right, so the wind of change. We'll leave on that note. I will see you all on the 15th.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
God bless.
Bye-bye.
Bye. There you go, Charles. I'll stop the live broadcast. Copy, stream. How do you stop it? That was very good. Better than very good. That was excellent. Outstanding. What's your view on it?
I was just amazed. We had some amazing speakers, absolutely amazing speakers, and we were so international in terms of how we had. And message for Theo and Sela and Lashini is, I think we might have got a deal for you because everyone knows Nigel.
I like how you sneak that in. That was good.
That was amazing.
I'm a negotiator, guys. So you know. And Martin, thank you so much for your notes.
Well, for what they're worth, but it kept me going.
But no, I'm blown away. So Gary, you've put on the table 15th of February. So we need some volunteers. Who's volunteering for 15th of February?
There's a lot that goes in technically, and we were stretched today. We had a power cut. We had bringing it on and off. It was really technically very challenging from behind. So, I could really do with some help.
Gary, interestingly, you'd set me up so I could actually I didn't realize, but I could actually bring people into the call. Yeah, so I did. I brought some people in. I got rid of some people. Yeah, I did all that while you were away. But I was so impressed that Zoom carried on, even though you as the host.
As long as you allocate somebody second in command.
Oh, okay.
So other than have a generator here, that was my backup plan.
So we got some volunteers for the 15th of February.
It's a Monday. It's a Monday, right?
It's a Monday. Okay.
Mm-hmm. We can definitely get some young people to help you.
I'd appreciate it.
You can help Theo, right? You can. So
Charles has had a lot of work. Do you know he really has worked tirelessly for a week on it.
But Sela, what about you? Have you got some time, or are you committed too much to online learning at home?
I was genuinely just checking my calendar for it. I will get back to you right now.
Okay. Lashini?
I am actually free on Mondays, so this.
You're free, Magic. Okay.
There we go.
Stefan, are you going to be in Saudi Arabia, or are you going to be
No. Saudi Arabia's borders are closed until March 31st, so
Okay.
there is no.
So
There's no travel until the end of March,
So
basically.
you're going to be in Corsica then. Excellent. We know where you are.
The thing about the word momentum, it's just like that snowball that we make, and it's a tiny little ball, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. We could make this a real momentum and a real move to the next one. Could be double or triple the size, and so on and so forth and so on. So the momentum can continue, but it needs all of us to get there.
So Gary, I've got to go now. So Gary, I really want to acknowledge all the work that you've put into this, and you and your team making it all happen. Big thank you also to LinkedIn for helping me find the speakers and for the sort of technology that allowed me to meet Theo, which has allowed me to meet Lashini and Sila. I mean, in the old days, Gary, which was when did we do the last one? In January or February? So in January 2020, I came all the way to Enfield to do one of these webinars. And now we're doing it from home, and we've got people from, I don't know, 10 countries, people all over the world, a lot of people from America, which is fantastic. Yeah. So it's all happening because of the tech. But I say I've got to go now. I've got another sesh at 7 till 9 p.m. on a complete.
Good
luck.
I've got to go, guys.
Okay.
Well, Charles, I think you did absolutely excellently.
And you spoke so well. So did you, Martin. And you young people, you killed it. You were amazing.
Yeah, that was the high point. Yeah.
Anyway, I got to go. Thanks, guys.
Good night.